Almost every kid you see today pretty much has like a laptop, a phone, an iPad, all the things that you could think of, almost every kid has today. And that's a huge privilege. It's not a given gift, it's a privilege.
The agency that I run now, Get Levrg, was formed from a networking event 3 years ago where I met my now business partner. And so I've created a multi-7-figure business, my third agency, because of a networking event.
I always tell people, find a feature that makes you stand out and that brings the light of you. For me, that's basketball because it's genuinely what I love and what I do every day. I eat, sleep, breathe basketball constantly.
Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest. Evelyn, do you mind describing what you do, how you do it, and who you serve and how you help the world?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast. So, a little bit about myself. My name is Evelyn, and I'm a huge diehard basketball fan. Before entrepreneurship, basketball and sports in general is and still is a huge part of my identity and really big sports enthusiast. I can name every single NBA championship from 1980 all the way up until now. Not as trivial, but because I truly love and enjoy the game. And currently, right now, I'm a full-time business owner as the CEO and founder of my current company, EVX, competing in the sports and media industry. And I proved my value through opportunity, execution, and deep passion for what I do.
Fantastic. So we're going to be talking about the power of networking. And listen, I'm born in 1978. So the internet was cresting as I started my working career. And my very first job was cold calling. I didn't have a computer at my desk. And so when I started in commercial real estate, I had to go to networking functions. Like, it was actually part of the job description. You would go to networking functions to see new office spaces, and they would bring all the brokers there, and you would meet all the brokers, the buy side, the sell side, the investors, the financiers. And the way that you drummed up a lot of customers outside of cold calling and the early days of emailing was networking. But over the years, the advent of email, paid media, there's just so many other mediums of communication. The act of networking has been deemed less, I'm putting kind of air quotes for those that are maybe listening in their car, less valuable because it's not scalable. But I can tell you, like, the agency that I run now, Get Levrg, was formed from a networking event 3 years ago where I met my now business partner. And so I've created a multi-7-figure business, my third agency, because of a networking event. So these serendipitous moments happen all the time at networking events. So Evelyn, with my first question, because you're clearly younger than I am, I think you're a perfect voice for this. Why is it that your generation, and this is a generalization, doesn't see networking as valuable as other types of sales and marketing known as go-to-market strategies for their business?
I feel like it has a lot to do with the internet today because everyone today has access like to the internet right at their fingertips. Almost every kid you see today pretty much has like a laptop, a phone, an iPad, all the things that you could think of. Almost every kid has today, and that's a huge privilege. It's not a given gift; it's a privilege, and really think that with the internet and everything that's going on, I feel like there's so many resources now. Networking isn't the most reliable thing. However, I do think that networking is still valuable in its own way. Just because there's things on the internet, there's resources, there's other ways to connect with people, doesn't mean that it fully replaces networking as a whole and the entire face-to-face interaction, because that's the real human part of networking, is that you get that human face-to-face and you get to understand people genuinely, not just because of work and not just because you're trying to get the job, but because you're actually trying to understand the industry and who the people that you work with and your competitors. I feel like that's a really huge aspect, especially when you're stepping into the industry of entrepreneurship or whatever industry you're part of.
I actually think what you're touching on is really, really important because let's say I've done, let's just make this number up, 100 networking events in my career. Not every one of them do I come out with a stack full of cards of leads, because early on in the business, I might not have known what my ideal customer profile was. I might not have had any idea that there was an adjacent market that I hadn't thought about that could be a great fit for my business. So being in a room that is the ecosystem of my industry, I learned about pricing strategies, product ideas, customer pain points I'd never thought about, objections. People, as I would do my elevator pitch and explain what we do and how we do it, I would hear myself not being able to articulate what I did in a clear manner because you can see it in their face. You get instant feedback from people like, oh, I don't have a great soundbite. I haven't perfected my story yet. Evelyn, I want you to picture you're in front of a 20 something group of entrepreneurs, and they're all poo-pooing your idea of going to the next networking event. They say big giant waste of time. What would be your soundbite to convince them that this has to be part of their go-to-market repertoire?
For me, I always say this phrase, and I say it again all the time. Networking is your best friend before anything else in this universe. And I'll forever continue to say it because there are so many people with talent, ideas, and things that you could never imagine in a million years. When I first started, even as an entrepreneur, it took me a couple months to even make a single dollar. My first client was actually an athlete who knew a lot more about basketball than I would ever know because all my life, especially growing up, I grew up playing street ball. So that person really opened the doors for me, and suddenly I was networking and bonding with people I never thought I would even talk to in a million years. Even at school, there are people who talk to me that I never imagined 2 years ago who would approach me today. And networking plays a huge role, like it plays a huge part into that. And otherwise, I would be a dead business and focus on getting a good education instead of making that money. And everyone you walk by, somehow or in some way, is always a network or opportunity that you do not know about, and making the assumption and burning those bridges quickly ruins your opportunities really fast. People always are often quick to judge based on age, height, the way someone dresses, talks, walks, etc. But it doesn't matter because the way that they show themselves is only one part of their social identity. You should never assume right away without knowing the facts first, and knowing the facts first meaning actually attending and talking to people.
This is probably the most sage advice you could give to those that are newer to networking. You, somebody who's been selling my whole life, I've come to be able to walk into a room and recognize, based on posture, based on crowds surrounding people, who are the alpha dogs, who are the beta dogs. I can tell you, I just came back from a CEO event at a place called Baldface in Nelson, British Columbia. It's a cat and heli ski operations. 48 CEOs, all either seven, eight, or nine figure CEOs. I can tell you, those that are the quietest, those that have the least amount of crowd around them, are many times the richest and most influential. It just happens that they don't need to flap their wings or show their peacock feathers. And there is something about the loudest person in the room isn't always the most successful. So, you as a networker, you walk in and you think, I've got to gravitate to these people because they appear to be the air quote, the cool kids
Right.
at the event. And I can tell you that there's more money, more opportunity to be made for those that people aren't talking to, who would be happy to talk to you, aren't interested in a giant crowd around them. They have a lot to say, but they like to do it in a more intimate way. And they're really happy that somebody's maybe going into depth with them. And so, and it's interesting, it's amazing. People can tell when you're doing, if you're a networking event and there's a badge, like a physical badge on their chest or a laminate, and you look at it and you have already made an assumption, you look like you're about to leave because you've read their badge and it isn't the perfect fit for you. You've ruined that opportunity. People want to feel like they are being listened to and cared for. And it is amazing. Those people could become other people one day. There might not be a founder in the room today, but they could be a founder in a few years, and they'll remember that you spent some time with them. Um, you mentioned that you're in the live sport business. Can you describe how you've been using network to grow your business?
For me, especially when I started, it was really, really hard because growing up, especially a lot of people told me that sports and entertainment isn't for women. That's what a lot of people told me growing up. And it really discouraged me as a kid because that's all I dreamed of. All my life, I dreamed of playing sports. I dreamed of being in the WNBA, even though despite how tall I am, I'm not that very tall. But I really loved it and I'm really passionate about it. So when I got into high school, I started networking with a lot of people. And I remember my first role that I ended up working at was a nonprofit organization, and I was the media and marketing executive for the year. And I know, oh my God, when I first walked into the room, all these kids my age, maybe just a little bit, like a year or two older than me. At the time, I was maybe like 13 or 14 years old. And these kids were like about the end of high school year, about to graduate, go into college, university. They were doing things that I would never imagine myself doing until after university, which was absolutely mind boggling to me that how much opportunity is given to us today. So I remember when I heard what everyone else was doing, suddenly I was hopping onto opportunities left and right and I was attending all these networking events. But I realized one thing though, is that I was introducing the obvious. The obvious meaning your resume or stating what someone else could see physically. Most people, when they introduce themselves, it's hi, my name is blah 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 blah. I work this, I work that, I do this, and they go on this tangent listing of what I could probably read on a resume in 5 seconds. And the reality is that it's all irrelevant. The way that you're supposed to sell yourself is one question and one question only. I remember I was at the Ontario PGA for women's golf and absolutely amazing, by the way. But I was talking to one of the marketing executives on the board, and I remember asking them so many questions like, how do you get into the industry? Who do I talk to? Like, what are the things I have to do? And he stopped me right there. He said, Evelyn, there are so many kids today, so many aspiring young adults who want to be in this industry. They send me emails, DMs, all the things that you could think of. But at the end of the day, so what is what he told me. And I thought about what he said. Today, a lot of youth and young people are probably attending the best schools, have honor roll, valedictorian, all of this. But at the end of at the end of it, what's left of you after your resume and all that experience? If you can't even answer that, you can't even land a job, let alone start a business. It's one of my biggest pet peeves because it's more important to me to be personable, genuine, and real versus I have 10 years of experience in this industry. And I think that's what really changed the way that I sold myself. So now every time I introduce myself, it's not a title no more, straight in the beginning. It's not my age, it's not my height, it's what I love, what I do, and why I do it.
Fantastic. Well, but you use that as an opportunity to tell the audience, what do you do? What do you love? And so people know how to get a hold of you if they want to know more or introduce you to other people.
Exactly. I feel like that's one of the greatest things about networking is that when you're more personable and you actually want to get to know the person, that's what changes everything, especially when you're at those networking events. Recently, actually, I was at a networking event where I was talking to a lot of people within STEM. I don't have nothing to do with STEM. I don't like math. I hate science. I'm not a very technical person. I'm more about the creative side of me because that's the part that I love is being creative and constantly coming up with ideas. And I was talking to one of the kids there and they're really amazing at coding and math, things that I could never do. They were doing things way ahead of what we're doing right now in high school. And I said, whoa, that's a lot. But I ended up exchanging contacts with them. And now currently they're revamping my website. And it goes to show that those connections can help you and take you further if you just to connect with the right people.
Fantastic. Before I let you go, this is your opportunity. What is your, imagine we were meeting each other. How would you introduce yourself?
How would I introduce myself? The same way that I introduce myself in this podcast. I always tell people find a feature that makes you stand out and that brings the light of you. For me, that's basketball because it's genuinely what I love and what I do every day. I eat, sleep, breathe basketball constantly. It's what I do, it's what I study every day, it's how I live my life. So, whenever I tell people, especially in interviews, this is what got me 99% of my interviews and 99% of my partnerships and sponsorships for all my businesses is that I love the NBA and that I can name every single NBA championship. When people hear that, they're like, "Are you sure?" Because every single NBA championship. That's over 50 years of championships that you have to memorize with scores, teams, players, right? Those are things that I like, not because it's for the work, but because I genuinely like learning about those things, and that it's what I grew up with. I grew up idolizing these players because they have mentality. Even though they might not be like a CEO of like a worldwide company, you know what they are? They're people who sell themselves every single day, and people know about them. And that's what life is about. It's about people knowing about you, what you can bring to this earth, because everyone has something valuable to offer. And I believe that if you sell yourself correctly, you have potential anywhere.
This has been fantastic. Words of wisdom. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for being on Outsource to Profits. I think there's a lot that the business community can learn about your approach to networking. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It's been such a great pleasure talking to you, and absolutely love the conversation.
Thank you.